Welcome to Catholic Homeschool Radio, where we begin conversations to help parents enrich their lives and make practical decisions for the future.
We're talking about alternatives to the four-year college path, and with my friends, Kelley and Karen Anderson. I'm Priscilla McCaffrey. We've discussed in part the need for that conversation in our households to get our kids to start thinking about this. And we want families and children who are not burdened with debt. We also don't want our child who doesn't elect to go to college, we don't want him to feel that he's headed for a second-class citizenship. So our homeschooling podcast hopes to get parents to start thinking and discussing these things with their children. I know a lot of homeschooling moms have a mantra when the kids are in high school, and that is, well, you'll never get into college if you don't do such and such. And so that is the thing we hold in front of our kids as the ultimate goal. And maybe that's not the best way to motivate our kids, but, I know we've all done it. So we've thought of what our young adults will avoid by staying away from campuses. And what is even more important is orienting them in such a way that they can remain in workplaces that model and support their culture, their ethos. So what you find is more and more companies will be enforcing political correctness standards on their employees. At least I think that's true. The office culture will have to accept the restrictions of free speech as understood by diversity officers trained by the state, which reminds me of the thought police. It's Orwellian. So in a way, I think rethinking the college path not only frees us up to have more choices after high school, it also makes us and our young people mindful of how to live in what really is a highly controlling secular world that for all intents and purposes supports a state religion called 21st century secularism. So we want them to become independent thinkers and possibly non-conformists. So let's think about what some of these alternatives are to going to college for 4 years. And I'm going to just give 5 alternatives that I found in a Forbes article. There actually are pretty many articles by a lot of very successful people who are angry about the college situation and sort of celebrate the individual's ability to educate himself or to find the right mentors, to learn on the job, to do a lot of research and to do a lot of reading on their own. And this was a simple article on the man calls 5 proud alternatives to college. Of course, there's the trade and vocational school, the military, volunteering, at least that would be for a gap year, and going in at an entry-level job, especially if you can find an area that you would like to work in. And then also good old entrepreneurship. So Amy and Karen, what do you think are do you know some good particular alternatives or some resources for parents to investigate?
I think the sooner you start having the life plan conversation with your kid, the better. Like I would not wait until high school, starting in middle school at least. But for me, it's more a sense of giving them the skills that they need to become valuable employees in whatever they're doing first. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the biggest training is you're raising adults. You're not raising children. Many people make this mistake. They're just raising their children and they're educating their children. You're not raising a child, you're raising an adult. And as soon as you start imposing upon them the standards of adult life and adult behavior, the happier they're going to be in the long run, which is to say discipline. I do something wrong, I'm not going to get a pep talk from my parents for 45 minutes. I'm going to get a more serious form of discipline for that from early on. so they see the cause and effect relationship very deeply at an early age. The second thing is good manners. Are they able to conduct themselves with good manners when they walk into a room to get something to eat, whether it's at a homeschooling picnic or whatever? Do they leave wreckage behind them? And I cannot tell you how many times I see this happen, as it's almost the norm when I go to anything. And these are parents who are spending tons of energy educating their children, but they cannot learn to get a napkin and put it under them when they're eating something. I find this staggering.
Boys and girls?
Boys and girls. It just staggers me. Destruction of other people's property, this kind of, it goes back to that narcissism I was talking about before, that if you really want these kids to be successful, you have to start them pretty early on picking up the pieces of their own mess. And if they're able to do that, they end up getting, they're valuable when they're in their teens, getting their first jobs. And that very often will lead to subsequent jobs. The teens are the times when you're experimenting with experimenting in a good sense. I don't mean like bad experimenting, but it's when you're trying, it's the time that you have to try out the different vocational paths. And one of them is a potential religious order too. We haven't even mentioned that. What is going to set these kids up? And I always feel that it's really important to actually train them for marriage, because if you train them for marriage, they will become very good priests or nuns. If you train them to be a priest or nun, I can't say that it'll have the same inverse effect. Nobody wants a nun or a priest who's useless around the house, really.
Right.
You're going to have to get your hands dirty in every respect if you have a religious vocation. So
I interviewed Sister Mary McCaffrey, a Franciscan, and she entered the order at age 17. And in our discussion, we started sort of unfolding why it was that so many young people were able to make these commitments so early in their lives, why people in her generation were able at the age of 17 and 18 to decide what their vocations would be. And so as we had this discussion, it was revealed that they had to make a lot of decisions in their lives. They had,
yes.
And one of the things that was a part of their decision-making formation was to decide to give up things. And so they had that habituation. Of course, that's, making doing a penitential sacrifice is virtue, but that also becomes a habit of thinking too, where you make a decision, I will do this, and then I'll carry through with it. So I found that to be interesting, and that, of course, relates to what you're saying about the formation of your young people. If we have to stop picking up after them all the time and make them more alert to their environment and their responsibilities within that environment. And then you have a more mature young person.
Actually, I have a hilarious anecdote about this. Someone gave one of my daughters a 1950s home economics book.
Oh.
And it went through all the home economics stuff. But right away in the beginning of the book, they have like a little sidebar of what does it mean to be a mature person. And I love this. It's one of the best descriptions of a mature person. And some of them were financially able to provide for themselves. One of them was a realistic understanding of your limitations, of who you are. Not this exaggerated idea of what I could be, but who am I? Right now, every single girls thing that my kids ever get that's from the secular world says, oh, you could this, you could that, you could the other thing.
You can be all that you
want to be, but it's not what
everything
are
you?
Being realistic about your
personal... You can be an army of one.
Yes. But realistic about your own limitations, able to deal in a group socially with a lot of other people. So it just had this run up of about 9 or 10 things. And I think that's why. And I agree with you, the business about letting kids make their own decisions and living with the consequences. A family I know that has also a few girls, and I was very impressed when the kids were quite little. One of them was thinking about getting out of a piano lesson. And I heard the mom say to her, well, you missed one last week. You could, how bad is your headache? She was feeling a little ill. And she said, it's up to you. You make that decision whether you want to go ahead with your piano lesson or not. The kid thought about it, and she thought about what she had already missed, and she said, I think I'll have the piano lesson, Mom. And to this day, those kids are extremely self-possessed, very altruistic with the world. They do very, things for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was clearly, this kid was probably 8 or 9 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she's now a very productive teenager.
Yeah.
So it's definitely part of the process.
Yeah. It's very mature.
I like what you're saying about talking to children about a life plan at a young age. But what if a child gets through high school and they still really don't know what their career is going to be? And I think for that, the military is very good.
Yeah, I love the military in theory. It's just I think it's noble to serve your country in some way. The problem is the politicians who make the decisions for where your children's bodies will end up.
I agree with you, but I think
that's my problem with it.
But even in the Middle Ages, I mean, people had to die fighting for some field that the king's mistress wanted.
Yeah.
It's still, as you say, a really noble thing to do. It's a life of service, and patriotism is a virtue.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this as a mother who is unsuccessfully trying to convince my son to join the National Guard.
Ah, well, National Guard's a good. That's good. And there are avenues. There are certain military.
Because the National Guard is it's like a reserve unit for your state.
No, not in the National. It's mostly the Coast Guard. You have more of a chance of staying home.
That's
they
right.
They do send,
Same
the
with
National Guards
Guard.
have been over. National Guard troops have been over to Iraq and the Middle East.
Really, but they usually stay home because they're state militia.
Well, they should, but
Yeah.
a lot of them were rounded up and sent off.
But I think it's good because you see people come home from military service, and it really does turn boys into men.
I have a very good example of that. I had a nephew who is Monica's age, no, a little older, Mac's age, and he was messing around in college, and actually something traumatic happened to him in his life, and it's actually was related to Ferguson, I would say, because my family's from St. Louis, and his friend was home for Christmas break, and he was in a car with his brother and a friend who was a girl. The girl was in the back seat. They had stopped at a stoplight on the streets of downtown St. Louis. Somebody came up, opened the door, grabbed her purse. He turned around. This is the friend. My nephew was not there. The friend turned around, grabbed the purse away from the guy, and the guy pulled out a gun, shot him in the head, and he was dead. And one of the reasons that has happened is because the police are backing off from monitoring the streets too closely in St. Louis. So this was pretty traumatic for my nephew to experience. He had been very close to him. So anyway, he decided he was messing around too much in college. So he came home one day, said, "Mom, I've enlisted." And she could hardly believe it. He was 19 years old. And he didn't talk to any of the adults in the family about what might be a better, a better way to go about this, so that maybe he could do ROTC, or he just enlisted. And the story ends well, at least as from a mom's perspective. He now is in the honor guard in Washington, D.C., and he's folding flags and learning how to walk in that beautiful drill-like manner that they move. So it was because he was raised by a good family. He had some very fine physical qualities, and he was the right kind of person for the honor guard. So he's doing that. So I mean, that's great, but not all stories end up that way.
The honor guard is actually very elite, so it's really wonderful that he got in.
Yeah, it is.
It's not the humdrum job. It's
no,
really
I know.
Quite...
You have to be attentive and alert. And so that brought out things in him that he had never even bothered to exercise in college, because he didn't care about the studies, and yet he had these virtues. And so I think it is sad that so many young men go to colleges feel like failures or feel that it was a waste of time. They never exercise their manhood.
Yeah.
And there's another website that was kind of interesting. I looked, The Art of Manliness. Have you ever seen that website?
Yes.
It's amusing, but they have a big series of articles on alternatives to college, and of course the military is one of the things that they promote. I think that's great. I think another area is that the Forbes article mentioned volunteering, and some people think of the Peace Corps. I do have a nephew who went to Paraguay. It was very interesting for him. And then there's AmeriCorps, where you would work more with inner cities, but there are a lot of Catholic missionary groups that you could work with. The Maryknollers have their lay groups. The Jesuits do. Of course, any parent would have to do, or your student would have to do a lot of research to find exactly what they would be doing, and who they'd be working with, and what the philosophy is behind.
And volunteering
group.
would be kind of a stopgap measure, right? I mean, you couldn't volunteer forever, so it would be something you did while you figured out what you were going to do next.
Yeah.
But the
So
military
that's like
could
the
really
gap
be your
year.
career. Yeah.
Well, it could be a career, or it could be just, spending your time usefully for a couple of years, and then maybe having more focus, because most 18-year-old boys, most 17, when they have to figure out what schools they're going to apply to, they don't know what they want to do. 17 years old, what do you know?
Volunteering is also a great way to get experience. I know when the plastic surgeon who my poor daughter got herself cut up while attending the March for Life.
Oh no!
It was a random accident, but the plastic surgeon, I noticed on his resume, he had spent a lot of time volunteering for one of the, I think it was Smile Train, or one of those places where they do a lot of plastic surgery.
Palate.
And what a great way to get practice doing something for somebody whose life otherwise would not be able to have this. And he gained a lot of experience, I think, doing that.
It looks great on the resume too.
Yes, that's true.
Even if it's not doing something as professional as working on on babies with cleft palates, if it shows that you've been able to disengage from your comfort zone for a while and gone to a different culture and lived with a lot of challenges, that's very interesting to an employer. And a lot of the major corporations are beginning to sponsor young people who are out of college, and they want to recruit them, and they're trying to think of just one more way of recruiting the select people, and that is to give them some time between college and starting work in the office, doing mission-oriented work. And there was an article about that in the Wall Street Journal. I know Aetna up in Hartford is helping to sponsor a young lady who was homeschooled, and then she was the valedictorian at her class at UD, and now she's in Jerusalem. She's working a little bit for Aetna there. She knows she has a job when she gets back, but she has this fantastic time doing something that has always been very close to her heart. So when I was a child, there was so much talk about helping the missionaries and working with the missionaries. And I thought that was beautiful. But then when I was in high school, I never heard about that any longer. And I think it's time for us to get kind of back to that possibility for our kids. Now, I know my daughter said when she was 16, "Mom, I'd love to go to Haiti and work out with the sisters, the Mother Teresa, sisters charity." And I had a priest friend who said, "No, you don't want to go to Haiti. Possibly Calcutta would be better." So there are certain things that are dangerous, and we have to think about those. I think it'd be great for some of our sons to do. And I think they always come back very moved by those. And I don't mean a 2-week do it for the college resume thing, but where you've given your life to help people out. So So that sounds great. I love the idea of a gap year.
And even closer to home, many of our children often volunteer with the Franciscans in the Bronx. People nearby need help too. And there are opportunities even in one's own town to volunteer. It's not as dramatic to volunteer at the library or something like that, but it's still a really good thing to give to your community.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah. There are some websites for people to check out, and as I did I say this earlier to you? Maybe it was off mic. There's a man, Michael Rowe, and he has his website is called Dirty Jobs, and he suggests you find something you're good at, not just something you love, but find something you're good at. And his website is worth going to. He's got tons of links for people who want to look into the trades, or who want maybe some assistance, financial assistance for taking some of these courses. So he's great. And then, so that's for the maybe not just for the gap year, or not just instead of a four-year college education, but maybe in addition to, because some of those lovely young men and women who are coming out of the liberal arts programs, Thomas Aquinas College, Thomas More College, Wyoming Catholic College, they don't have a career plan, or at least one where they can think about supporting a family. So it behooves them to start looking into these programs too, and perhaps do that before they go to college or after they go to college. And then as kind of an alternative humanities program for those who do go to college and or the trades, but they're not majoring in the humanities. There are some new programs out there for people interested in the great books. There's a program that is sponsored through Holy Apostles College and Seminary, and it has joined forces with the Angelicum Online Academy and Father Fessio, and it's the kids could if they go through this program, they could earn an associate's degree at the completion of 12th grade, and if you stay on the same plan, you could actually earn a bachelor's degree by age 19. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage people to look into that. It would be you would look under Angelicum Homeschooled students. You could look up under Holy Apostles College and Seminary. And it's a very interesting program that takes some of the ideas of the great books and some of the courses of theology online. And your teens in high school would have a pretty good education with that. And a lot of these courses, a lot of these credits will transfer to other universities and colleges too. So that's something for people to look into. And then for your young people, and actually all adults who want to continue learning in the liberal arts, there's a new group called the Alliance for Liberal Learning. And they have that you would have to Google, and they've modeled themselves on the Great Books program that Mortimer Adler started, and in fall of 2015 they've started they launched their own organization. And they say, in the hopes of rallying humanist troops to the defense of the Western liberal tradition. So that's a good resource for people to look at. And, that's for anyone who wants education and understands the importance of the Western liberal tradition. And, I think that the education of the canon of Western civilization is something that we should all be involved in preserving. And I think we should at least present it to our kids, no matter where they're going, to college or not to college. They should be familiar with that canon because it is under attack. And somebody said, what a shame it was that this wasn't now no longer being promoted in the universities. And his father responded, well, it's been there for 6,000 years. It's about time that we went on to something new, which unfortunately is the way some people think.
I think that's really important because it really does take basically one generation to lose things like that. Yeah. And it is kind of, if our civilization is crumbling, it's kind of like the cornerstone. We really can't sacrifice that. So it almost should be a mission statement. What am I doing to save the civilization first of all, save my soul, but then secondly, what am I doing to save my civilization and therefore the souls of my fellow men?
Well, as you were saying, a family develops its own identity, and when it's a cohesive family, they have more of an identity. And if our civilization doesn't have an identity, we don't have a civilization. And it's a kind of a parallel to what our country is now without borders. We don't really have a country when you don't have borders.
I love that program you mentioned that Holy Apostles offers, because that seems that it offers to young people the opportunity to get a lot of what you can get at a Catholic college and still go on to choose something different after high school.
Right.
Or to go to a secular college, but still have that great books kind of education.
Right. I don't know if everybody has to be on a track to get a degree with them. Maybe they allow anyone to just audit the courses just so that you can listen to them. And Hillsdale has some great courses online, especially their government courses and their courses on the Constitution. So the internet, while it's our foe in a lot of ways, we really have to use it for all these great opportunities.
My sons have done some of the Hillsdale courses.
Oh, they have?
Yes, they're so good. I know a lot of homeschoolers that have done them.
Do they get a grade, or did you just have them listen to the talks? Or
no, they didn't get a grade, right? But they listened to all the talks, and it was very good for them. And as a result, we now get the Hillsdale publication, which I almost always enjoy.
In Primus.
Those are free, aren't they?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Those are
free.
Amazing. There's
They are
also
really good.
the Dominicans out in California have started online courses, and they're about art and architecture primarily.
really?
But yeah, I don't remember the name of the group, but I just got a thing from them, and they're starting these online courses, and they're just wonderful.
What is the cost? Do you know? Because the Hillsdale ones are free.
These are not free. These are college courses, but I
Okay.
think they were reasonable. I'm thinking maybe in the $200-300 range.
Okay.
But it's that's a great thing.
And I think Hillsdale might have literature now, don't they, Priscilla? Because I know they started out with government and constitution.
They have presentations, all worth listening to, but I haven't seen accredited courses.
Right.
You get it. I think if you go through their government courses, they will give you some kind of certification, which might not mean anything to anyone anywhere else. But we're not hung up on certification too much, except when we go to the dentist or the doctor.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks, ladies. I think we generated a lot of ideas, and I appreciate your being here. Thank you.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.